So I'm Les from That's My Entertainment, and I'm just going to have y'all go around the table and introduce yourselves if I could. I'm
Okay.
sitting here with...
I'm Robert Russler.
Hi, I'm Miss Missouri Mark Patton, and I won the Scream Queen.
Oh no, this is going to be really boring. I'm Kim Myers.
I'm Roman Kimienti, co-director of Scream Queen.
I'm Tyler Jensen, co-director of Scream Queen.
So I was thrilled that I got to watch the doc prior to doing
excellent.
this. I feel like it's always a bad idea to walk into interviews having not seen the person's work, right?
Right.
Something that I didn't understand about documentaries when I was a kid, before I understood how movies were made, is that there has to be a narrative thrust, that there has to be choices made narratively to make this a story and not just a gathering of information. It's not like you just shot B-roll footage for 2 years and then put it on screen.
That is the game, for sure.
When it came to taking what was Mark's relationship with the film and then making a documentary of it, to have an act structure and to pull me narratively through it, which it does very well. I very much enjoyed the entire documentary. What were the choices that y'all made, and did those change over knowing Mark and making the thing? Was there ever a shift in the structure, or did you always kind of know how you wanted to show this whole story?
The beautiful thing about Mark Patton is that he tells stories beautifully, and he knows how to tell a great story. And when we were traveling with him across these conventions, it became the structure. It was like, oh, this is a road documentary. Mm-hmm. We are going from city to city, and we are telling the story of this man's experience, and having to pick and choose the best version of those stories in each of these cities became our blueprint to how do you unfold someone's life in every different city as they're traveling the world and opening up this wound time and time again. Like, what is the most compelling place, and where does this fit in the narrative of the past, the present, and the future?
I would imagine that, so that it isn't reopening this wound each city, that something has to change in the story for you of what this movie means and where it fits into your life. Is that different for you now after the documentary? And if so, how has it changed for you having told this story now?
Oh, okay. Well, it's really interesting because the thing is, you don't want to get trapped in the trauma, and I want everybody to know that I'm not harmed by this in any way at this point. I mean, I have a very good life. I enjoyed my life, but I like sort of use an AA model because I know a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think it's a perfect way to tell your story. What it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. That's what we're telling here. It's like, this is what it was like in 1985, this is what happened to me, and this is how I healed from it. And it's a journey, and it's interesting with this. The people that you really want to talk to in regard to this are the people who sat for the documentary and what happened to them. I mean, we were going to Copenhagen. Jack Shoulder and I were invited to Copenhagen. And he's going. He accepted this invitation for a queer theory film. And they're going to show Scream Queen, and he's going to speak there. And I really encouraged him not to. He doesn't really have any business being there. He's not equipped to do what he's about to do, and he doesn't really understand the language. And now he's going to experience what I experienced when he says to me in the film, well, it's not all about you. It's like, why don't you just get over it? Now he's in a film that's not all about him, and he's going to get to experience the same feelings I had. Same with David. So it's a learning experience. I've learned deep, deep compassion for people in this last 5 years, and especially now, and for myself. You know what I mean? I finally fell into some compassion for me. And and I got to sit down and obviously this is not a pity party, but I got to sit down and have a good cry for myself, and I needed to, you know what I mean? Because I say that in the film, I gave up a lot, to stay away from that world in the way that I did. And I see my friends and our friends, I always tell the story of Robert Downey Jr. was my dog walker at one time, and he destroyed my house, and he owes me a lot of money because he left the dogs there for 3 days, and they pissed all over everything. He and Sarah lived in my back room, Sarah Jessica Parker, and they went on to become billionaires, and it's like, I'm not saying that I would have, but I could have. I was in the lane, and I stepped away from it. So I had to think about that in the end. And now I feel like the universe is just throwing rose petals and dollar bills at me now. to pay me for my journey. So I'm thrilled.
Clean up all that dog mess.
Yes, absolutely. And I get to be who I want to
At least it's
be.
covered in rose petals.
Oh, I know. I thought about sending him a note saying, you remember when you let Walt and Cheyenne piss all over the floor? We lived on the top of Mulholland Highway, Tim and I. And it was like right in the sun. And, you know, Robert went away his deal was he was going to take care of the dogs to stay in the house. And it was carpet. I mean, the drapes were pulled down. They were laid in the middle of the floor. It was just, and Sarah's shoe collection was taken care of in the back room.
That could have happened without the dogs. Just so
I
you
know.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. He may have actually been.
Yeah.
I know for me, I saw all of the Nightmare films far too young. I think that's probably how we all did. And I remember being a kid in the South who knew that there was something different about what was happening to me heading into puberty a little than my peers. But the 80s, the time that this was happening, it seemed like everything I learned in puberty was a new rule of what was gay. Which side could people have an earring in? Everything seemed like this ever-expanding list of rules, and it really all kind of came down to vulnerability. And so when I first started hearing that Nightmare on Elm Street 2 probably would have been voiced at that age than see Nightmare on Elm Street, but I wasn't aware of pre-internet. I really wasn't aware of the larger take of this movie until I got a little bit older. And when someone first explained that to me, that it's kind of considered a gay horror movie, I thought, son of a bitch, this is another time where having a male lead be vulnerable is immediately gay. And it took me a little while longer to put together that this wasn't just my homophobic friends telling me that this movie was gay, that this was a wider understanding of this film. And it's still, when I rewatched Nightmare on Elm Street 2 after the documentary prior to doing this, and it's still, I can believe that it is simply a vulnerable man, getting to see myself in Nancy instead of Nancy.
Well, don't you love that when the boy says in the documentary where he said, and I wanted to be her.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be Nancy because Nancy gets to kick the bully's ass.
Yeah.
This is a big, heavy conversation about masculinity going on here in this world right now. Is what boys are allowed to be. Boys are not allowed to be frightened. I mean, in the pedagogy of our world, right, men are not allowed to be frightened at all or be vulnerable. And that's the one rule. I mean, that's what makes a man is that he's not allowed to do any of those things, which we all know is bullshit. But, but we're coded that way. When I was a little boy, like your code, the earrings, mine was, I remember it very specifically. I read in a book someplace that gay guys parted their hair on the left, and that if you parted your hair down the middle, that meant you were perverted in some way. That was a sign. Now, this goes back a long way. And also, I was told that gay men can't whistle. If you're a fag, you can't whistle. And I could never whistle. And where? I mean, they come from other men who throw them on other men since the beginning.
They carry force of law. It's crazy.
It is. And literally, and I would be like, oh, how nobody asks me to whistle because I can't whistle.
The things that we have to worry about and carry with
And
us,
I don't
it's,
know those.
it's distracting from your real life.
I'm going to say something
With
gross.
someone else's projection to
Yeah.
make sense of something for themselves.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say something gross now, I'm protect her because she's my.
I'm a mother.
She's a mother. But something that really affected me for a long time. My dad told a gay joke when I was young, and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what it meant, but I knew that I was supposed to. And it was something to the effect that when a gay man farts, you can't hear it. And I didn't know what. Right. Because
I shouldn't laugh at that. But
it has to do with because they have anal sex, and that there's no and I didn't know what the joke was. I literally didn't know what they were talking about, but I knew I was supposed to laugh at it. But I also knew that I was very shy about my body. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, oh my God, it's like I'm born, a
the
fart
butt
joke.
of a joke.
Yeah, exactly. And my dad had no idea that he was gay. My dad would have never done something like that to me. Never. But it's common in guys and in horror films to do that kind of stuff, and you don't realize that all that stuff is landing on somebody.
Yeah, I'm sure nobody. I mean, I did everything I could to hide the fact that it was landing on me.
Right.
Nobody
We all
found
did.
out if I did my job right.
If you could pass.
Right.
If you were lucky enough that you were able to pass.
Well, and I came out to my parents as bi in March of this year. I hit 40. And,
Congratulations.
Thanks. And that was very much the math I did. I remember Matthew Shepard being in the news and thinking if I can pass, it would be suicide to not.
Right.
And that just stayed with me. So I never saw myself in Rambo as a kid. I never saw myself in the action movie heroes. I knew I wasn't that dude. But so Nightmare on Elm Street 2 for me was I got to see me. I got, I'm the kid on the back of the bus that this is happening to. And it didn't click why this would be any different than what happened to Nancy in the first movie.
Right.
When you were going back through this documentary and establishing this, what was it like to delve into the queer theory of this film, but at the same time keep it fun and keep it a horror about the movie and about Mark?
Oh, I screamed about that all the time. It was because it's easy to delve to the dark parts and stay there, and so how do you go back up and have fun every now and again and keep it something that's lively, because it's a heavy topic, I don't know what it's like to be in a Hollywood movie. I don't know what it's like to have Hollywood come at me for being in a Hollywood movie, but I do know what it's like to be a gay person that feels less than in the world. So having your end game and knowing that the intention is to be positive in the end and look forward, it kind of helps you just tell the story how you need to be, not wallow in the pity, but make sure will my mother understand what we're trying to say? That was kind of the intent. Keeping it a little bit elevated to like a wider audience allows you to tell a story that, just where you're going with it. And it was definitely a balancing act to be able to, because we had a lot of fun on the road.
Yeah.
There was a lot of fun stuff that happened, and fans are always wanting to talk about Freddy Krueger. And
The best part, I think, for the fans of the film, when we introduce everyone at the reunion and they get to see each other and embrace each other, everyone is like, oh my God, I'm like oddly emotional about that. Like, it's nice to see these people come together. At the same time, our biggest challenge as filmmakers was nailing that intro and like setting up the structure of how this movie's going to work and getting
so
the
much to
fun
say in, like,
and
2 minutes.
getting the history in as quickly as possible that makes you want to go on this journey. You don't want to like, oh, is this going to be 2 hours of like tension and terror? Like, am I ready for that? Like,
I feel like you laid the roadmap out really well at the start. I knew what this documentary was going to tell me about, different from Never Sleep Again, and where the focus was going to go.
I think the thing is, like, a lot of people assume that we were just like really focused on the Elm Street part of it, which we really weren't. It comes down to the fact that we live in a city, in an urban bubble, and every time we step into a place like this, we meet people that are still shaken by their experiences. We're surrounded by gay people, and we take for granted a little our freedoms that we have where we live. And when I met you in Maryland.
Right.
And I was shocked just walking into that theater.
That was fun. I forgot all about that.
That's where we first
A
talked
vanity.
about
Somebody
Scream.
threw a birthday party for themselves, and they pretended it was a convention. It was like some weird, crazy lady. And it was like all of a sudden we were in a movie theater with like 25 people watching the Elm Street movies, but they came from New York, and we had
Because we
ramen
wanted to talk
noodles.
about this movie in
that was
person.
so we need to thank that crazy
I
lady.
was not prepared for what I saw. I walked into this crowd, and there's a big crowd of people, and they all looked very stern, and it was a bunch of obviously horror fans that seemed like they were, I better not let them know I'm gay, they'll kick my ass. No, they all lined up to tell their stories of woe to Mark.
Yeah,
And I was like, whoa, these people are guarded.
It's a penny. I think the three of us have like Robert and Kim and I have something very much in common. Kim doesn't really live very much, and neither does Robert. Robert's, still fully invested in his career and doing really, really well. And Kim is the same, but also is raised in. So, but we are iconic in social media, and people place great importance on us. I mean, I have so many letters, millions of letters from people who want us to be in love with each other. You know what I mean? And they want it. And I mean, they want the whole...
And the great thing is we are.
We are in love with each other. I mean, I loved him because he said we were talking about relationship at one point. And what did you say? It's like, oh, we were boyfriends at the first time we met, which was true.
What did I just say to you yesterday in the text? Where's my boyfriend at?
Where is my boyfriend? But it's true. He like
I'm
when we
gonna
were
have to get back.
when we were
Yeah.
filming.
Yeah, I'm
when
gonna
we
go
were
on
filming, he was protecting me. Robert Russell was
The same
protecting me.
dynamic that happened in the movie is still prevalent here today.
Right, and her, and with Kim, it's like I always think it's really interesting. Like if you really look at Nightmare on Elm Street through a real queer eye, right? Okay, go and watch Kim and I's scene in the cabana, right? And like take it from this, add one little fact into the fact of the movie, right? That she's just realized that her boyfriend is gay, right? And I love the way she plays the scene because I had a relationship like I had with Kim, where the girl's like, no, we'll walk you through this. It's like, I'm going to walk you through this now. It's going to be okay. We'll get through this and we'll get to the other side. And I believe that's exactly what she would have done. And I believe actually that's what Lisa would have done too. So, I think it's really cool. And I love it when kids project that on and tell me, oh my God, that's what I would want it to be like if I told my girlfriend, that my horror show was, my Freddy was being gay or whatever. So I'd love them to recut this movie, actually. I mean, people have, actually. There's after-school specials. We have a Brokeback Mountain Nightmare on Elm Street between the two of us, which is really good. And I'm putting together I ordered a picture book. I'm having a Grady and Jesse picture book made of, and it's
coloring
cute. And
book?
Ivy Trout is doing all the art images of us in the showers. And so I'm going to keep us covered a little bit, but anyway.
For me, going back and rewatching this movie after kind of understanding background on it and then the overall interpretation of it, I wanted it to be a much more positive movie. If it came out now, it'd be in a very like, this is fine, this is okay. I could have maybe, if it had come out, if I was growing up right now, maybe it would have landed differently with me. And then I read David Chaskin's interview about it being homophobic and not.
It was meant to be.
Yes.
Yes.
Or and I could never drop this sense that no matter what I might tease out of it good for myself, I was being trolled
Yes.
by the screenwriter. And it made the choice to make the third act, I mean, you couldn't have done anything else but your conversation with him for the end of the documentary, but it's really what, that moment is what brought it all home for me, and I really can't believe your patience and the amount of work you must have done to make that a safe space for him to talk.
Oh,
In
that's
that?
that. That's these boys, but I will tell you this, and
I would have
and then I'll
bailed out
let
of the
him
room.
talk.
I would have.
I would have God went right on top of my head and right out with that one. Yeah, because as you know from seeing the movie, David didn't apologize to me. He did what everybody's dad who's never been in therapy did. It was like, well, I'm sorry if you felt like I
Yep.
hurt your feelings. And David did troll me for 20-some years, and very intentionally. He would say one thing, and then he'd give it to the New York Times, and he would call me a fag. Now, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
And how do you be kind to that person? And that was the one thing that we all agreed. We weren't going to do a number on anybody, And we could have done a number on David. We could have done a number on Jack if we wanted to, but we don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not our intention.
Yeah, you don't twist a knife.
No,
It just,
never.
But it does put him on the spot to at least own it a little more than he ever had before. But I still I was so impressed with you in that moment
I
for
would be-
holding to your truth there.
You know what? I learned the power of truth when at many points along the way. And it's like you're in a bubble of divine protection when you're telling the truth. Because, like, I love people who, like, come to you with gossip, and say, oh, this is what I just heard about you. And when you have the power to say, well, you heard that because I told somebody. It's like you're not telling me anything I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I put the word out there. I'm a human being. I'm flawed. I'm all of these things, and you can't shame me for it.
But Mark took the high road the whole way, and when you're taking the high road and you're utilizing truth and whatever comes with it, you can never utilize justified anger because it'll always be read wrong and your story will always come out false. And so that's exactly what I feel happened a lot in that power of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. From my perspective, being able to empathize with Mark in a completely different way because there's never sympathy. There's never been sympathy from me, from my character, and the perspective of my character still works because that's who I am. If you'll notice from the straight man's perspective in this movie, there was never judgment on his sexuality. That's never been a prerequisite for someone to be my friend, as it isn't now. And I think there was no mistake of me being cast as Grady and Kim being cast. It worked in a way where it left it up for people to interpret for themselves in one respect. And then the other respect is what you guys touch on so brilliantly, which hits it on the head, which there was a naivety that was going around that I was questioning from the beginning. And that's how I have always been, because I'm like, let's just be honest. Let's put the truth on the table. What's the dynamic here? What do you expect from me? And what's your idea of what you think? Because our own relationship's going to blossom just as it did in the movie on its own. Mm-hmm. A lot of that stuff was there, but a lot of the dynamic between the three of us came about in the performances and in the relationships because my character never attacked that ever. He never questioned it, never attacked it.
Yeah, and
but there was that subtle thing that was going on between us in the beginning that got cleaned up by the end when he came to me for help. I never attacked him for it or judged him for it.
Yeah, and that would have been such an 80s thing for him to do. You know what I mean? That character is like to call me a fan. And he never does. And it's the same thing with Kimmy. But, you know, the thing is, I don't, to hop to the metaphysical, which I am happy to do at any given moment, I really believe that we made that movie for this moment. I'm absolutely convinced that the only reason I ever made Nightmare on Elm Street 2 was to have this conversation.
So that it could just hang out there for that time and be here now. Yeah.
Right, and to have this be the interlocutor to the conversation that we're having at this particular moment in Austin, Texas, which is really important to have. This conversation right now. And whether it be about race, gender, color, whatever, religion, you know, we all got our turn in that barrel when somebody just shit on us, you know, and you get to go back and clean it up and say, you know what, I think you misunderstood me. You saw me as a vulnerable, nice, kind person. I am a kind person, but I'm a strong man, and don't cross me, don't poke despair. And that's what Dave continually did throughout my life. He poked me until I couldn't stand it.
And that's where more empathy came from me in watching the documentary is I knew that Mark had obstacles and challenges, but I didn't realize the depth and how much they did really affect him and what was going on with him personally, where when I watched the documentary, I got emotional and it made me proud of who I am, that I always treated him the way that I have. And that when I was a boy, I understand what it's like to be hurt. I understand what it's like to be betrayed. I understand what it's like to be judged and misunderstood. And that's what made me who I am. And it gives me gratitude as a man. It makes me a better father. It makes me a better friend. It makes me more empathetic and understanding and compassionate. But I mean, you know, I also had a little bit of guilt for ideas that I had when I was younger about, you know, other people's struggles. And so when you get to take a look, like you were talking about, sometimes, you know, taking a look at your own truth is eye-opening, and that's the wonderful healing thing that can happen when you have that kind of openness and willingness to look at somebody else's story and go, hey, that must have been really hard, and I'm here in this moment to support you, to support this endeavor, to support the movie, to support the filmmakers, and to keep our relationship going, which we were talking about earlier. When you make a movie like this, even if this subject matter was never there, and the obstacles and all these things that Mark and the filmmakers are bringing to light, you're still a family. But this made us even more of a family. This makes me feel like I'm even more loyal to our relationship.
We're the new family. This is what the family is supposed to look like when you have that conversation.
It's the modern family.
Yeah,
We are the
Robert spoke a lot about sincerity and truth when we talked to you in Florida. It was actually very inspiring. Like, it made me. I used that as inspiration a lot, because there was it could easily just turn into a reverse bash, like, oh, you know, we're angry gay people, but there's a similar experience that a lot of straight men have. You're very guarded, aren't you? And I think that we have to learn to see that it's not just like it can be a human experience, like the
it should be.
weight that men carry with them.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I would
yeah.
honestly, I mean, maybe I would not want to be a straight man for anything in the world. The load that you have to carry on your back, the expectations of you. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown, like her fellow Texans. And she talks about, you know, she wrote a book and this guy came up to her and said, I really liked your book, but you didn't mention men. And she's like, well, I don't study men. And she said, that's really convenient and easy for you. She said, the people that are toughest on me, I'm a man, and the people that are toughest on me are the women in my life. Have high expectations of what it's like to be a man. I feel blessed to be gay because I can talk about my feelings. You know what I mean? I can't imagine what it would be like to carry around discarded. I am the fixer of all problems.
Well, they don't have an outlet also for their
Sports.
all of it.
They're
Screaming
afraid
in
to
an arena.
scream.
Yeah.
They're afraid to scream.
Yeah, but they can scream in sporting events and in violence. And I think that's why they're attracted also to horror movies. You know, I mean, you see that, like you get to go in that church, you know, the movie theater is a church metaphor.
But I do think that's a connection. That's where our,
Yeah.
that's where the answer lies. Is being able to kind of say, this is something we all share.
But here's the funny thing too, you know, that there's always that exception, you know,
Yeah.
and I am an exception. I can only speak for myself because I've always been able to speak my feelings. I've always been able to be honest and acceptant of others, and I think that a lot of it has to do with what I've experienced when I was a young boy and how I was raised by my father.
Right. It has to do
And,
with your
and I
father.
think it goes the other way too about what, you know, kind of stereotypes that gay men have, and especially in this context in Hollywood. And I like that we break it open, and we don't necessarily have to have an individual sort of perspective on it. What I like about what you guys did is another time, again, you leave the audience to be able to interpret for themselves Mark's experience, what happened, and what it's like now, you know, and you guys also opened it well with what it was like, because I really enjoyed, and watching before I met you, things that I didn't know, and where you grew up, and how you became, you know, how you got into the film business, and very, very different from my story, but so much to relate to.
Right.
And I think that's why I really love what you said about it all coming to now, because I think that's the key to life, is being able to accept that and really being open to that everything comes around. There's a synchronicity that happens that I couldn't have written any better if I would have had the choice to.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been ready to do this interview last year. I wouldn't have got what I got out of this
Right,
movie.
because you're free this year. You have a freedom. Yeah, I think, and like it's so interesting because Kim is the voice for me in Scream Queen, is the voice that advocates for compassion. That, you know, like when she's in the elevator and she says, well, he is having his catharsis now. Like that, somebody like the father figure in the movie is Jack, right? And he's like, well, get over it. You should have gotten over it a long time ago. And then she gets to say, this is him getting over it. You're watching him. You're honored to be in the presence of somebody getting over it. And she always speaks to that voice. I think it's interesting how that played out in the making of the documentary. How each of our voices are like, you really see that Elm Street crew. Like, I mean, if you really want to go to that pedagogy, I mean, we're a family. You're dissecting a family when we're sitting around that fireplace. And, you know, and the people that are there. I love, like, Marshall and, you know, and the conversation and, you know, just the smart-assness of Jack, you know, thinking like, oh, I'm going to put another one over there on you guys. And like, ha, ha, ha. And it's like,
I called him out there too.
You did. You
Yeah.
were like, you really did. We got a lot of
And
fun.
I did during the making of the movie, and I did in the audition, and I'm never gonna like change who I am or what I said
Oh, you know,
or
but-
how I saw it in one perspective. Even though my perspective changes, I'll never have to go back and re-explain myself, and that's what I was talking about. What makes me proud of
A lot of us did not make
who
it
I
through the
am
80s
as a
and 90s with
person.
that.
I never had to go back to Mark and say
make
I'm
amends.
sorry.
Yeah.
I never had to because I never did anything to hurt him. Even sometimes when we had a little discrepancy, it was part of art. It was part of, creativity. There was never anything personal to it.
Well, it's
And
funny, Jack said to me, like, not too long ago, we were on the road, we were in Dallas, actually, and at the Alamo Draft House there. And he said, well, I'm not going to apologize to you. And we were at dinner, and I said, well, I don't expect an apology. But do you feel like you're supposed to apologize to me? Because if you feel like that you are supposed to apologize to me, I'll unburden you of your burden and listen to you. And I think, but like the universe knocked on Jack's door a lot of times, and he didn't heed the call. And so I think he's heeding the call today. You know what I mean? And I've watched him go through an epiphany this year, from the time that he called until today. So it's all about growing. We're so deep. I love this. Nobody go too deep.
I mean, but that's really like, let's get to the nuts and bolts, because sometimes when you want to get to the depth, it's really about getting to the simplicity. And sometimes getting to the simplicity is the hardest thing to achieve, because you can beat around the bush and you can talk, but like, let's talk what's really going on. And that's what I thought was really done well between us at the fireplace. We all just let it out.
Well, and also with you and David, I'm sure he would have talked circles for an hour if you.
Oh, David
let him.
is still talking in circles.
Yeah.
I mean, they have 4 hours.
I really can't believe you pinned him down as well as you did.
He
It
was there for 4 hours before, and I said to them later when David says, like, he screamed like a woman, and that look on my face, I was convinced really that they had. I said, oh, I wasn't in the room when he said that, right? Because he would not have the balls to
Surely
say that
would
to
not
me
have said
to
that
my
to
face, right? And they were like, no, you were there, and I was in a blackout because I unpack it later, but I don't think people can really understand how much I hated that, how much I hated it, because I grew up from a place where like rocks were thrown at me from the time I was 11, right? And I succeeded. I never let anybody get in my way, and I let some chubby man sitting in a dark room making a fag joke bring my sugar. And I should have been. It's interesting, it's when you talk to about trust. Like, I totally trusted Roman and Tyler with this. I've never asked them anything. I would have them take a cut out of this movie and change nothing. And there are things that I don't like, mostly they're vanity things about angles and me. That I was like, did you really have to do that to me, Or why didn't you tell me before you were shooting that, like, you might want to do something differently? But the thing is, that was trust. When I did Nightmare on Elm Street, I had come from working with Robert Altman and Geraldine Pope, big directors. And the job of the director is to protect you, right? That's the deal that you make with them. Is like, I'm going to do everything that I want, and if I make a fool of myself, please stop me or edit it out or do something to protect me. And I'm going to give you everything I've got, right? And I believe in writers. I mean, I read every piece of punctuation, I honored the writer. I honored David. I wrote what he wrote down. And even though sometimes it didn't make sense to me. And then to be betrayed by that. And I came to understand that Bob Shea, Jack Shoulder, David, nobody read that story. Nobody knew what they were doing. And then when they did understand it, at the very least 25 years, 30 years later, they could say, oh, well, I see it now.
You could own it.
And it's like, you live in Los Angeles, California, you've been in show business for 35 years and you don't know any gay people. I I mean, like Jack actually said to me at one point, he goes, well, I never knew you were gay. And then he goes, in the same sentence, he goes, well, you know, the rumor on the set was that you were the lover of the producer, of Michael Murphy, that I was Michael Murphy's lover. And I was like, well, how could you not know that I was gay and that you think that everybody's saying that I'm Michael Murphy's lover because he's taking such good care of me? That like how do those two things live in your mind at the same time? And they do. They it's amazing the denial that people hold.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even Joel Soisson and those people. It's like I knew those people as people after the movie was over. You know, and some were trying to protect me because they had to, and some I just like it's very interesting to have those conversations and for them not to be based in reality in any way.
But you know what? Let me say something that may or may not be on your behalf, because I heard you say, you know, nobody ever ran you over or whatever, and then I don't know how much you were affected when David sat in that dark room and called you a name, but I don't think that you were ever on that level of vulnerability up until then. Like you're saying, like being in a lead in a feature film, and those little jokes aren't going between, you know, 3 or 4 people having a chuckle, but it's going out to the public. So it leaves them even extra vulnerable. So there's, you know, there's no shame in it, you know, like obviously anybody's defenses are going to get up in the beginning and go, wait a minute, like you're saying, like, wait a minute, there's a line being crossed here, and I don't accept that.
Hell, if I felt mad at the man,
Oh, you know, we've had the experience because we've been in 6 cities, right? He's been pissed at. People come up. We were in Alabama. We showed this film in Alabama, and my friend which was like, I love the context of in my friends in Mississippi said to me, you know, the whole Tim aspect of the movie, right? Tim Murphy movie. She was like, oh my God, you know, you were 26 years old, 27 years old, and your husband died. And if you were a woman, you'd be a widow. And they would hold you up. I was expected to show no, to not be affected by this. You know, my dad said to me at one point, he said, you know, we had in common, he had been in Korea and he'd been wounded twice, and he was a master sergeant. And he lost an entire group of men, 100 men killed all at the same time. And he said, that's what we have in common. It's like you've been through a war. And like that people are not expecting that you should say anything about the war. You know what I mean? Like I'm just supposed to sit there.
no,
like,
that's that thing you did.
Yeah, let it slide
that
out.
summer.
Yeah, your friend died. And you buried him.
Yeah,
And it
just
was
live
in
with
the
that
newspaper.
PTSD.
Yeah, we had to become numb like that, and to like fight out of that numbness. Like we're talking about, like when It is out now, and like when the rape happens in the beginning of the movie, or the bag bashing happens at the beginning of the movie, and you hear, or when the guys kiss, and you hear the audience go, you know, like this. It's like if you're a gay person and you're sitting in that movie theater, you turn into yourself. You know, you turn in like this, and you start to protect yourself because you know you're not in a safe space any longer. Because if people really in the dark really think that's funny and it's hysterical, and they want to vomit when those gay guys
and
kiss
I'm in
each
the
other,
wrong room, right.
that's what they really think.
Yeah. I'd never done the chronology of placing this movie in the era that it happened in.
Right.
I had never put Nightmare on Elm Street 2 alongside And the Band Plays On as happening simultaneously.
Exactly, and that there were riots literally in the streets, and that the president of the United States never mentioned even once that thousands of people had died. Now imagine, like you're in a situation where all your friends are dying and nobody mentions it.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to say anything.
And no clearer signal that you aren't cared about. And
Right,
not safe.
and in Hollywood, you're really defended against the whole. Most of the casting directors, most of the people are homosexuals that I was dealing with. And they're all like playing this game, like we're all in the room together and we all know the real conversation, but we're not going to have it. Would it be okay with your girlfriend if you played a gay person in the movie? Would she be embarrassed to see you kiss a man?
Yeah.
Can you handle that?
I think one of the best things I've seen recently was, I think it was Johnny Galecki from Big Bang Theory that got asked about the persistent rumor that he's gay.
Right.
And is he insulted by, or I forgot how they phrased it, but they were basically asking him if he was angry about the rumor, and his comeback was, I'm sorry, is being gay something that I'm insulted?
Right.
Is that supposed to be an insult?
Right.
And it shut the interviewer down. I wanted to, like, sitting at home watching my TV, and like, that's how you respond to that. There's an implicit understanding in that question that it is an insult. It's not, and it shut the question down.
Robert, that kind of goes to what the other interviewer was asking us about. Your comment about how society has changed in terms of its acceptance of gay people and the discussion. And I was saying, you know, it feels that way, and I can't speak to it personally, but it does absolutely seem that way. However, there are still people sitting in the dark of the movie theater, letting out perhaps the real response.
Yeah.
So in this business, whatever business, but particularly the entertainment business, where somebody has a persona in the studio, trillions of dollars based on that persona, is that person, if he or she is gay, is she or he actually comfortable to
Come out.
live their truth and
Be
come
honest.
out? And I don't know. I don't.
Even watching that interview for me, it didn't occur to me to answer that question that way. I sat there and cringed for what was about to happen. I have seen this interview before. I figure this is about to be somebody making a lot of noise about performatively why they are definitely not gay, and I was shocked.
Yeah, but see, you're like as a gay person, and like at that pinnacle, right? You're in a box, and the box, there is no right answer, because if you say, well, is that supposed to be something to be gay? That's okay, you're gay.
And that's
Okay.
how I felt as a
Or
kid.
I'm,
There was no answer. There was no way to have the
The
discussion.
whole thing now about Mark Robinson was like his coming out is like, well, I'm really more interested in people's intelligence than I am in their gender. Faggot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally, there's no right way to answer that question if you're straight, except for no, I'm straight. And then that's offensive.
Even then, if you say no too many times, then
Right,
you're
and
really
then
gay.
it's homosexuality is a very interesting topic in humanity. You know, it's very interesting, and it's going to go on and on and on and on, and there are going to be many different versions of this.
I'm afraid that I'm eating into someone else's time. I'm so sorry
Oh, I'm
about
sorry,
that.
they're backed up like train wrecks.
Yeah,
Did you get everything
I
you
got
need?
more than everything I need. Thank you
Okay.
both so much.
Thank you.
I
Let me
really
say hi.
appreciate it. Thank you.